Today we have some special guests, and they are here from the Pinellis County Advocates for Race Amity. Did I say that right? Woo! I did it. All right. Well, I'm really excited to have them here today. So this was something that actually I was approached about, and I was really excited because, as you know, what's our theme on Fridays? Say it out loud. Compassion, right? We talk about compassion. We talk about compassion to humans, to animals, to the environment, and to our world. And I was speaking to one of the people here about something else that they're doing with the school, and then they told me about this other group, and the group approached me about coming here and showing a documentary and doing some questions and answers. And it was wonderful because it was something that totally fit into the theme of compassion. Because if we can't show compassion to fellow humans, how can we show compassion to others? Would you all agree on that? Right? We have to be able to show compassion to all people, whether they're the same as us and in our peer group, or they're people that are totally different from us. And there's so many types of differences. Right? And we need to be able to look beyond that, and we need to be compassionate to everyone. So I love what they're doing. The organization is doing a lot of great things in our community, and I'm very thankful to have you here. So I welcome you. So this is your guest. Now, do you guys want to start by speaking, or do you want to start right into the documentary? Can you guys come on up and introduce yourselves? Come on, don't be shy.
Hello, my name is Arya Azizi, and we're showing this film that we received a while back, and it pretty much is about different situations in history where there was history where how do I say this? Collaboration, right? Collaboration and friendship between different races and different ethnic backgrounds and different classes, and kind of overshadows what we hear in history today about how there was so much tension between the races and things like that. So it's just a different perspective, different information that we receive that shows that at one time in history there was people living together in unity. It's a simple brief explanation.
All right, and my name is Sue Hirschberg, and I've been involved in this group since it just started in the past year. We got together. We've already grown considerably. So it is a documentary. It's it's based on historical accuracy, and but it's kind of uncovered some history that most of us aren't familiar with, and hopefully you'll find it. You'll appreciate some of these episodes and you wonder, why haven't we heard about this before? So I hope that will be the case with you. Anyway, I hope you enjoy it.
So what we'll be doing is we'll be taking one segment at a time of the documentary. We'll watch it. They're in short segments, about 10 or so minutes each. We're going to watch it, and then we're going to do a couple question and answers for each segment. Okay? All right, so we're going to go ahead and begin segment 1.
Race amity combined with education is the key to the future of this country. We have to know each other. We have to learn to live with each other. We have to respect each other. We have to recognize our differences, but respect those differences. Understand that we don't all have to come from the same cultural background or the same ideological background, but we do come from the same basic background of being a human being. We're all members of one race. We are members of the human race. The strength of this country lies in its diversity. And I think it's a key to our future. And a younger generation must learn that And race amity is at the background, is at the very base of accomplishing that result. And unless we accomplish that result, we're not going to be as great a people as we hope to.
Many stories have been told about America's dark past, of a nation founded on the unshakable premise of racism. Stories of violence, hatred, and injustice, of dominance, enslavement, and marginalization. Stories ending in bitterness and complete segregation. Our history haunts us to this day, giving us the pervasive belief that racial conflict and inequality will forever be a part of the American landscape, and that we will forever be captive to the racism that is such a tradition in our national culture. But did you know there has always been a parallel moral counterweight to the tradition of racism? Fomented at first in small and intimate acts of resistance, this ever-present pushback has grown into movements involving hundreds of thousands of Americans who believe an integrated, multiracial society is possible. In every generation, courageous whites, blacks, Native Americans, Latinos, and Asians have joined together to counter America's racist tradition. Sharing major portions of their lives, they risked their reputations, financial stability, and personal safety. Whether running away from bondage and enslavement in the 1600s, riding the anti-slavery circuits in the 1800s, or fighting court battles and marching together in the modern era, close association, friendship, and amity have always been at the heart of these movements. The binding glue of amity supported vision, courage, and the grit to take on what at times seemed insurmountable. Age after age, this other tradition of cross-racial friendship and collaboration has given active testimony to Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s eloquent observation that the arc of the moral universe bends toward justice. In examining this other tradition and the amity found at its center, there is a need to know more. What is it about amity that gives it a power to affect human affairs?
Is that everything that exists in the world exists because of relationships. So, for example, water, which is the basis of life, exists because of the relationship between hydrogen and oxygen. Everything in the universe owes its existence to something else. So relationships are at the foundation of all forms of life. But when you come to human relationships, you discover that human beings cannot live as humans without relationships. When you are able to achieve an authentic, meaningful relationship with another human being, it turns out that that accomplishment itself causes the human being with which you are relating to come forth and causes you to come forth as well. So we create one another by relating to one another in an authentic way, in a way that is animated by genuine or true love.
The force behind our nation's greatest social change has always been amity. People coming together to advance access, equity, and justice. The stories of the heroes and heroines of past centuries and the relationships they forged through the struggle enrich and embolden our perspective of who we truly are as a nation, giving us a new lens through which we can witness ourselves and our history. Their stories are part of the unfolding American story of race amity and the other tradition. A tradition built on close collaboration, friendship, and mutual love and respect. Stories of the best in us as a nation.
In August of 1619, a Dutch pirate ship named the White Lion arrived at the port of Jamestown, Virginia. On board were 20 Africans, the only survivors of more than 350 destined for the New World. The others perished on board in the dank and crowded bowels of the ship as it made its fateful voyage across the Atlantic. The pirates handed over their human freight to the British governor of Virginia, and in turn received a fresh supply of food. Only a decade had passed since the British settled Jamestown, and with this exchange, they brought North America into a global economy, reliant on the enslavement of Africans. To modern minds, America was destined to become a country marked by racial segregation, animosity, and estrangement. But during those earliest days, as settlers fanned out from Jamestown, a few multiracial communities began to form through natural association and common interests. One such community was Northampton, Virginia, just across the Chesapeake Bay from Jamestown. For one generation, from the 1640s to the 1670s, whites and blacks in Northampton were arranging their personal affairs and making business decisions with optimism for their futures and the fortunes of their heirs. By the 1650s, 30% of black men in Northampton were free, and 20% owned land. They lived alongside white farmers in relative equality. Whites and blacks exchanged land and livestock, hired and fired each other, and rented rooms in each other's homes. Black farmers also routinely initiated court cases against whites when land disputes arose. Court records show no pattern of favoring whites over blacks in their rulings. This gave Northampton's residents a chance to form a multiracial middle class. Emmanuel Driggs was a black man who came to Northampton in 1645 and signed on as an indentured servant with Captain Pop. His contract stated that his daughters would become free as adults, and that Pop would provide them with clothing, food, and a Christian upbringing. Driggs eventually purchased his own freedom, and then leased nearly 200 acres of land from others. He negotiated the right to farm the land for 99 years, showing a belief that he could secure a profitable future for his children and grandchildren. Relationships between white and black landers went beyond business. It was assumed that anyone who owned land was a part of the community. Cross-racial marriages occurred within the middle class, and courts were willing to leave orphaned white children in the hands of black parents. In 1674, a white man named Nicholas Silverado was charged by Northampton courts for fathering a child out of wedlock. When he failed to pay the parish for care of the child, the court ordered the child be put out to nurse with Jane Harmon, Negro, the wife of William Harmon. The Harmons were given money and other resources to foster the infant. Cross-racial friendships were common within the Northampton community. Emmanuel Driggs forged a strong friendship with an Englishman named George Williams. Their bond was so strong that when Williams took ill, he assigned Driggs as the executor of his will. Williams also left Driggs 11 months of his own wages, a chest full of tobacco, and all his possessions. While Northampton's black middle class was larger than most colonial towns, anyone who's politically defenseless or lacking ties to more powerful people found themselves in servitude or slavery. This included the poorest whites, Indians, and blacks. In the face of oppression, multiracial cooperation was the key to survival. Slaves and servants often ran away together. Formulating their plans required mutual trust, secrecy, and a commitment to guard each other's safety. Incidents of black slaves running away with white servants increased across Virginia. In some cases, small-scale rebellion grew into armed revolt. As a result, Virginia's legislature enacted a series of laws to dissuade multiracial coalition building. It began with punitive measures against white servants who ran away with black slaves in 1661 and ended in 1705 with a code that legalized a racial caste system and enforced racial segregation. By 1705, blacks could no longer employ whites or travel without permission from a white plantation owner. And free black people had to leave the colony. These slave codes stemmed the flow of access and equity in the developing colony. The hopes of black men like Emmanuel Driggs held for a profitable future in a multiracial society were completely decimated.
Stopping right there. I know you have some questions right now.
Yeah, I do. And I wonder if before we probably just have a few minutes, 5 minutes. If I could ask if anybody feels like you learned anything from this piece of the film, anything that you didn't know, any of it surprising to you, or was it boring? I hope not. Because I think maybe we should review it a little bit. It starts in 1619, which I don't know if you know that in 2019 it was called the 400 years of African history in America. So it was a commemoration of 400 years. And you see how Africans first came to this country, right at the beginning, as slaves. I mean, that was it. And we talk about the tradition of racism. Does it seem to you that we have a tradition of racism? It kind of does, doesn't it? And yet, who knew about this community in Northampton, Virginia, that where people were intermarrying, were having business dealings with one another, were collaborating in their farm and plantation ventures and so on. You know, it was pretty new to me, and I studied American history. Anybody have any thought about that? Is it all new? Okay, well, let's just move to the questions. Why don't you do the first one? The ones that are still here.
So the first question is, as a child, what was your understanding of why some people were wealthy and some people were not?
I feel as if some people were wealthy simply because either their parents or grandparents. I simply feel like since some people are wealthy because either their parents or grandparents were wealthy growing up, or they got that money from like farming or people that they hired.
I found that people got wealthy for many different reasons, depending on the individual. Some people worked, others stole, and some people just inherited. But I thought the overwhelming majority of people who did get over six-figure incomes worked for it, either through a job or a business.
I mostly believe that
things like money are usually based on things like work ethic and basically willingness. Like, say somebody loves their job, is probably going to make more money than somebody that hates it. Just saying.
Anyone else over here? And remember, I think the question you're asking is in relation to this film, correct? So guys, you're giving me answers, or giving them answers based on today's society. That's not what they're asking. They're asking for answers based on the film we just watched. Okay? Monica, do you have the answer based on the film?
I think we all know will is like during that time it's very common to have a will and give most of the money and the property from during the time. Plus, yeah, plus, I mean, you'll be ill soon. You don't have a will.
Anyone else? We're going to base it on the film? Okay.
All right, so I know that this film goes through many different time periods, if I'm correct, right? I'm correct, okay, great. So, it kind of depends on what time. I mean, if we're talking about the film, like, section we just watched, it was definitely based on things like the type of person you were, which is definitely not socially acceptable today. The thing is it was also based on other factors, too. I mean, definitely.
Actually don't work, they get more money because the slaves give them money to them.
We have the United States to be, of course. Yeah. But at this point in time, there were some who were successful in this community of Jamestown. So I think the question has to be, what happened to them? Why did we lose track of that happened? So maybe we should look to the next question.
Next question is, what was your family's attitude about people in power?
So the question is, what is... Thank you. It's not working at all. So the question is, what is your family's attitude about people in power? Is that it? People in power today?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. This one going a lot of directions where I may need to stop it, honestly. So I'm only going to take, you want to move past that one? Okay, go ahead. Question?
It says, what are your earliest memories of being aware that people are mistreated based on the color of their skin?
I think that is an awesome question. Okay. And I'm just going to take a few people because we only have a very limited amount of time. So if you have your hand up, it's got to be up big.
So I was in public school for a while, and I once saw this kid, and he was new, and he was African American. He always got lower test scores than everybody else, and I was really curious about that. And he allowed me to look at his test. They were all the same answers to me, yet I've always getting, really high grades. So I told the teacher, like, hey, why is he getting all these low grades? And she didn't have an answer. And he actually went to administration and they had to fire the teacher and everything.
That would be called racism. If that example is accurate, if that's true details, that would be a prime example. Okay.
Like, I remember one time when I was walking out of Walmart or something, like there are two black people in front of me, or African American, I don't know what I should properly call them. Anyways, I think like the guard or something, like the mall cop for example, was like, hey, let me check your receipt and stuff. And he had to look over the receipt to make sure they actually bought that stuff. Yeah, when me and my dad walked up, he didn't check our receipts.
Did you think that was fair?
No, it's because I think they were assuming that they stole based on the color of their skin.
That's horrible, isn't it? Yeah. And that's really cool that you remember that and you think back and say, yeah, that wasn't right. Okay, because that will make you not make those kind of decisions when you're aware of what's happening. I'm just going to take one more.
When I was in New York, there was a restaurant I was at, and they refused to serve somebody because they were black.
That is so illegal. Yeah. Yeah, so illegal and so nasty. Okay, so we have a limited amount of time, so I'm only going to take a couple responses for each question. And then if we have extra time at the end, we can always go back to these, okay? But I really want you to be thinking about what we're talking about, because probably most of you have seen something in your lifetime, and maybe you were aware of it, maybe you weren't. But what I'm hoping is that now you start thinking about it, and maybe now you'll remember a situation where you saw something that didn't feel right, and now you can put a finger on what it was. Okay, so we're going to go to the next segment now.
America's early development was principally shaped by the interaction between Native Americans and European settlers.
Well, in general terms, there were developments that brought people together across the frontier. And the most important path here, just how it is written, was trade. Trade required some degree of accommodation of one another's peoples, of one another's cultures. Trade created what Richard White has written as a middle ground, a shared identity of sorts. Trade was very important to the colonial economy, or for most of the British American period. During the close of the period, though, Indian lands became more important to the colonists. And the thirst for land parched the middle ground. Thirst for land drove people apart. In fact, it was in many respects the origin of the British-Indian War. And on the western frontier, people were most concerned about gaining land.
While cross-racial interaction and friendships between leaders of Native American and European groups were not the norm, they did occur with frequency and significant positive impact.
All the founding fathers knew Native Americans. They were still part of life in the 18th century. From New England to Georgia, there were relationships and there were influences that reached across the frontier. Bostonians famously used Indians as the motif at their Tea Party. Some of the individuals dressed as Indians in order to demonstrate what was distinct about the New World from the Old, and as symbols of true independence. Benjamin Franklin in the Mid-Atlantic colonies. Benjamin Franklin, in his Albany Plan of Colonial Union in 1754, the opening of the British-Indian War, cites the Iroquois Confederation as his inspiration.
Among the lesser-known founding fathers was Charles Thompson. Thompson was secretary of the First Continental Congress, a position of highest power in the formation of America. He emigrated to the new land from Ireland as a boy, with his father and two brothers. Thompson was known in early adulthood as a spiritual person of integrity. Thompson gained the attention of his fellow patriots in the pre-revolution actions with the ongoing friction between Native Americans and the British and French, both of whom wished to hold dominance in the new land. This was a main contributing factor to the French and Indian War.
Well, there were a series of conflicts between France and England and began in the late 17th century. And the last war was different. This war began in America, and it was a contest for land in the Ohio country. And the adversaries were the French and their Indian allies, and the British, American colonists. and a few Indian allies.
The value of having Native American allies to the contesting French and British forces was quickly and dramatically demonstrated.
At Fort Duquesne, where Braddock is crushed in 1755, well more than 2/3 of the forces against him were Native Indians allied with the French.
Among the Native American nations in the conflict were the Delaware, or Lenape Nation, and its maverick, controversial chief, who was the self-proclaimed king of the Delaware, T.S. Gunn.
T.S. Gunn was born in New Jersey in 1700, and already by that point, in the eastern portion of the Lenape Nation, it was quite anglicized. He wore European clothing. He spoke the English language. He eventually would accept Christianity, and he lived for a time at a Moravian mission. He also saw family members and others die of European diseases. T.S. Gunn was living at a very difficult time. The Lenape people had been pushed progressively west. Some of the treaties are questionable, if not outright fraudulent. The most notable was the so-called walking purchase in 1737. And it was to allow territory to be annexed as far as a man could walk in a day and a half. But they took and hired 3 of the fastest people they could find in Pennsylvania, prepared a special path for them to cover. And one gentleman actually made it 70 miles. And the conclusion was it was a 1.2 million acre, about the size of Rhode Island, addition at the Lenape's expense. I think we have to look sympathetically and even supportively in some respect at the efforts that T.S. Gunn was making on behalf of his people.
As T.S. Gunn pondered how to advance equity for his people, the British realized after the defeat at Fort Duquesne the importance of having Native American tribal nations as their allies.
T.S. Gunn met Charles Thompson in 1757. He knew him over a span of several years. He very quickly learned to trust Charles Thompson. Charles Thompson was a man who spoke the truth, and that was the adoptive name, in fact, that the Lenape people gave Charles Thompson. Lulabong, which means one who speaks the truth.
Thompson demonstrated his veracity for the truth when he exposed the changing of treaty documents by the governor's Indian agents and reported it by letter to the governor.
May it please your honor, I find the said deed of 1718 is not among them, and having a printed copy of the said deed and treaty in my custody, I could not, consistent with my duty under my present circumstances, nor the concern I have for the honor of His Majesty, King George, and the real interests of this province, omit thus submitting the premises to your honor's consideration. May it please your honor, your most obedient servant, Charles Thompson.
This important letter was written just as the British called for a treaty meeting in Easton to sway the native nations not to join the French in the war with the British.
Charles Thompson earns the respect, he earns the trust of T.S. Gunn.
T.S. Gunn insisted that Thompson be the recorder of the treaty meeting in Easton, the outcome of which would impact whether France or England would become the dominant power in the land. T.S. Gunn's relationship with Charles Thompson led T.S. Gunn to encourage the attendees that a fair treaty could result.
By pledging neutrality, the Iroquois, the Lenape, the Shawnee nations finally broke the alliance that supported the French and enabled them to withstand the far superior numbers of the British and English colonies arrayed against them.
The French lost the war, which helped set the stage for the American Revolution 20 years later. Meanwhile, the friendship of Charles Thompson and T.S. Gunn continued. Thompson was adopted into the Delaware Nation.
It was not uncommon for Native Americans to adopt others into their nations. Charles Thompson would be an example where the Lenape people did this, but it was more than just a diplomatic gesture. It was more than just a tactic, a sense of manipulation. It was a sign of respect. It was a sign that this person can be absolutely trusted. They are family.
5 years after the treaty was signed, T.S. Gunn died tragically in an arson fire as he slept in his cabin. Charles Thompson continued as an influential participant in the formation of the United States of America. Among his tasks as Secretary to the Continental Congress, Thompson created the illustration of the new nation's motto, E pluribus unum, of many, one, which graces our currency today. His moral clarity resulted in his writing a letter to Thomas Jefferson warning of the evils of slavery.
Dear Sir, it grieves me to the soul that there should be such just grounds for your apprehensions respecting the irritation that will be produced in the southern states by what you have said of slavery. However, I would not have you discouraged. This is a cancer we must get rid of. It is a blot on our character that must be wiped out. If it cannot be done by religion, reason, and philosophy, confident I am that it will be one day by blood. I am, with great esteem and regard, dear sir, your affectionate friend and servant, Charles Thompson.
Actually, I'm going to tell you, when you just read that letter, I started crying. Yeah. That was truly beautiful. So when they were asking the question about leadership, I was thinking of that person, and I was thinking what an amazing leader that man was. If you just hear the letter he wrote, those words were truly beautiful and very deep, and I really hope that you were listening to them. Truly, they just made me cry. Because people, there are good people, and we have so many bad people in this world, and those are always the people that we're talking about, but there's also good people. And this person was trying to make great change. Beautiful letter.
The thing that I'd like to point out is, so has anybody ever heard of John Hancock? Right, John Hancock? Okay, he was the first person to sign the Declaration of Independence. Okay, we have buildings named after him, we have insurance companies, you know, he's a well-known name. Who had heard of Charles Thompson? Anyway, I had never heard of Charles Thompson, and I studied with him. And he was the second person to sign the Declaration of Independence. This was Pinellis. He was Secretary of the Continental Congress. I'd never heard of him. Why are we not, you know, and has anybody ever heard of E pluribus unum? What does that mean? Out of many one, E pluribus, out of many one, yep. And it's on the dollar bill. See if you can find it on the, if you happen to have a dollar bill. So that is, this man, Charles Thompson, created that as a motto, out of many one. I mean, what does that tell us about how the intention at the beginning, and then what happened? What happened? So to me, what we need to learn from this is asking more questions. How did we have these instances in our history of collaboration and friendship and amity? That's what the word amity is about. We've got, if you, afterwards, if you want to come and look at the definitions here, friendship or peaceful harmony. That's what amity means. It sounds a little like enmity, which, you know, is confusing to people, but it's amity, A-M-I-T-Y. That's what I hope people seeing this will begin to ask questions. We've had these kinds of instances in the past. Why do we not remember those things? Why are these things not brought out in our history? Do you have any?
I think the trend of the film is that there's always these instances of racism and things like that, and it's almost like a reoccurring event. And we're always wondering, how do we end it? How do we stop it, you know? And there's these cases where they tried to lose, you know, in a peaceful way, which worked, but there's still always, somehow it always kind of gets muddy and mixed, but, you know, with this framework of race and amity, it allows us to come together and discuss our differences in a peaceful, you know.
Well, how does colorblindness help to perpetuate structural racism? That's pretty, yes, it is. I don't know if anybody has any thought about that at all. How does colorblindness, So, you know, sometimes, oh, well, I don't think about color. I mean, everybody's the same to me. You ever heard that? Maybe you said that. What is that? Anybody have any thoughts about that? Yeah, somebody here.
Maybe it's the denial of a problem, it kind of like perpetuates, because like if you have a problem and you just pretend it doesn't exist, then it's just going to go on and on forever.
I think that's very accurate, yes. That's good.
Well, and also you can think if you don't see any difference that everyone else doesn't, and that's often not true. You may live by that, but the person next to you may not live by that. You know, so we can't assume that everybody always thinks the way that we do. And right now we're talking about race, but race is a form of prejudice, and there's many other types of prejudice as well. And we don't want to have any prejudice. What we're talking about is having compassion to all. And what we're trying to hope is that you can start to look at everyone as the same, because we're all human beings, we're all unique. What if there was prejudice against you because you had blonde hair, or because you were shorter than 5 foot tall, or because you were taller than 6'2"? Okay, if you change the word race to something else, the prejudice could be directed right at you. And how would that feel if the prejudice was people with green eyes? And that's what I want you to be thinking about when they're talking and when you're hearing these stories. They were having prejudice towards certain groups of people because of their race. But prejudice, whatever it's looking at differently and making us treat people less than, is a bad thing. And that's what we want you to take away from this, correct?
One of the most under-celebrated stories towards Amity is the cross-cultural relationships that emerged from the farm workers' movement in America, which was intensely focused on changing the deplorable conditions of farm workers.
There was no unemployment insurance, no workers' compensation coverage, and so when the season was over, if you didn't pack up and fall into crops, you starved.
The poverty was so desperate of the workers themselves.
And Mexicans and Mexican Americans, Chicanos weren't the first group that were caught up in the system. You know, Japanese came in, and there was Chinese, and Filipino workers were brought in.
And the grower was pitting the groups against one another.
The way that the agribusiness organized itself was that they were very keen on using different groups against each other, groups keeping them separate so that they wouldn't get together, that they wouldn't band together and begin to demand for fairer conditions and better wages.
It had its beginnings when Fred Ross Sr., a persistent grassroots community organizer, met the charismatic Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta. The work of this triad advanced labor rights to an important new level.
Fred Ross is a central figure in all of this work. Fred's commitment to helping people went back many years. You know, he began working with the Japanese who returned during the Second World War, and then after that he ended up here in the Central Valley, just 15 miles down the road from where we're at right now.
Well, I was very blessed to meet Fred Ross Sr. And I was very active in my community in Stockton, belonged to a lot of different social organizations. And one of my teachers from the college invited me to her house and met Mr. Ross for the first time, this tall, white, gangly person. As we sat there in that meeting, he described to us all of the things that they had done in Los Angeles, how they had brought in streets and sidewalks and clinics into the Latino area of East LA, and how they had registered people to vote. And I saw that they had actually sent police to prison for being a Mexican American. I thought I want to belong to that organization. So that was my introduction into the community service organization. And he's changed Caesar's life too, because you know, Caesar, when he met Fred Ross, he was in San Jose, and of course Fred made him an organizer. And so I always like to call Fred Ross like the godfather, the padrino of the Chicano movement.
Dolores was the lead negotiator in the early days, negotiating some of the big contracts. You know, she was the lobbyist and the person that oversaw the legislative work for many years in the movement.
Her strengths were her passion and her commitment and her dedication and her skill as an orator and so forth, and as organizer.
She was also the person that the growers didn't want to do it because of her tenacity, and she was just tough as nails, and sometimes people would joke that they'd rather do it with my dad because Dolores was so tough.
I had known Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta as a kid, and had watched how Cesar and Dolores had begun to build a farmer movement.
It's amazing that people from different walks of life will attribute their social activism or their commitment to community service to my father's life and the inspiration that he provided me. In my dad's case, he dropped out of school at the 8th grade, after 8th grade, to become a full-time worker to help support his family. But if they were growing up, they would go and they would work in the fields alongside their parents to try to make ends meet. And child labor was rampant in the fields. You know, it was that precise predicament that really fueled my father when we talked about the look in his mother's eyes when she let him know that he needed help support his family, his brothers and sisters. When he came to California and began working in the fields and saw the brutal nature of agribusiness, that he could never accept it.
In 1952, Ross began efforts to organize farm workers in the San Jose, California area by getting to know the local community.
And it was during that time that Fred Ross came to East San Jose and spoke to Father McDonough. He says, listen, I'm looking for somebody that can help me organize a chapter. Do you know anybody? And it was at that time that Father McDonough suggested that he speak to my father. Fred Ross, being the diligent person he was, gets my dad's address and goes to the house and knocks on the door. And my father's there and he sees him and he's saying like, oh, just what I need, another white sociologist from Stanford.
He was sick and tired of anthropologists for coming in and asking insulting questions to the folks about, why do you have so many babies? Why do you just eat tortillas and beans? Just insulting questions. He had enough of that.
See what this guy is, he tells my mom, and see what he wants, and introduces himself and says what he wants to do. And my mother, being the beautiful wife, says, well, Caesar's not in.
My dad comes back a second. Same story. And this is where Helen Chavez plays an important role. She says, Caesar, I'm not going to lie to you. This guy tries to beat up a little car. He seems sincere. At least hear him out. And after you hear him out, you don't want to do anything, you tell him face to face. So Chavez reluctantly agrees to be there the third night. Sure enough, my dad comes back the third night. But Caesar won't let him in the house. They meet out in the driveway. And my father tells him what he's doing and asks him to host a meeting.
And what Fred asked him to do is, okay, why don't you get together a group of small friends and let's talk about what we can do. And so my dad said, okay, I'll bring some of my friends together. And so they leave and the house meeting is set up and for a certain day. And so my dad gets his buddies together, some street toughs, right? And he says, okay, we're gonna give this guy a rough time and we're gonna kick him the hell out of here, right? So they're saying, okay, so they're ready to go, and so the meeting comes, and the guys are there, and Fred comes in, and he thanks them, and he proceeds to begin talking about the conditions that Latinos and poor people find themselves in.
What my father doesn't know is that Chavez has set the plan. And his plan is, about halfway into the meeting, he's going to move the cigarette from his right hand to his left, and that was a signal for the people in the meeting to just start insulting my father and drive him out. And about 10 minutes into the meeting, he writes, none of my stories are connected. No one's looking up from the ground. I can't get Caesar to look at me. that one of the things that Caesar told me when we met was that he was sick and tired of him and some of his friends being racially profiled by the cops. Some had been beaten up, some had been discriminated against.
It catches my dad's attention. And so he's listening, and what he's saying is beginning to make sense, and it's resonating. And so, my dad's got the cigarette, and so his buddies are waiting like, come on, Caesar, when are we going to do this? And my dad's listening, and after a little bit of time, my dad is completely engrossed into what Fred is saying, because it makes a lot of sense. And he's not about to change that cigarette because he wants to hear more. And it was the beginning of a long relationship where my dad was inspired by Fred, but more than that, he was really mentored on how to work with people, how to organize with people.
Anybody who would criticize Fred Ross Sr. to Doris Huerta or Doris Huerta to my father, watch out. They had been through too much. They had grown very close, and there was deep mutual respect and love. And the friendship that emerged from being comrades in arms, as Doris and Caesar were with my father.
A lot of people, when you ask them, who was Fred Ross, people don't know. Because that's how great an organizer he was. Because he was able to get Cesar Chavez, to also become an organizer, get myself to become an organizer. So, I owe, as I said before, my life to Fred Ross.
Fred Ross Sr., Cesar Chavez, and Dolores Huerta shared a legendary friendship that changed the lives of millions.
We know about the tradition of racism, and it's important that we study the tradition of racism. But at the same time, we need to understand that there's a parallel tradition. In fact, they're interrelated.
There have been people all over the country, all through history, who have been able to envision a different kind of society.
Well, I think it's always very important to understand that any time you talk about the vicious legacy of white supremacy, that there's always been a resistance against white supremacy, including among white brothers and sisters. But we must never forget that we've got a large numbers of white brothers and sisters who have always been open to racial amity, always open to friendship, always open to companionship, always open to being on the love train. Well, I was moved by the words of my dear brother, Governor Winter. I know he was telling the truth in terms of the ways in which, through courage, we can forge a connection at the human level that cuts across skin pigmentation and skin color. And the question then becomes, following dear brother Governor Winters, how do we make contact with that human base to shatter those kinds of fears, anxieties, and insecurities and be vulnerable enough to make the human connection? That's what love is. It's a vulnerability. It's taking a risk. It's embarking on an adventure. And there's some good stuff waiting for you if you're willing to step out on that nothing and land on something. And that something that you land on is precisely that transformation of yourself. Racial amity is an idea whose time has come.
I'm thinking, has anybody ever heard of Cesar Chavez? Yes? Some of you have? Okay. Okay. But I have a feeling, I'm learning that we need to introduce Cesar Chavez before we start this. But I hope that you've seen a pattern in these three. So we started in the 1600s, then it was the 1700s. This is this century, 20th century. 1950s, I think most of this took place. But if you see the pattern of collaboration among different people from different backgrounds, it's not just skin color, different history, Latino we were talking about in this last section. and extreme poverty that people live in. And I wanted to point out too, since the one about T.D.S. Gunn and Charles Thompson. So if we do not have Native American blood in none of us in our background, we are immigrants. Our families are immigrants. The only true Native people to this country are Native Americans. So, it's a perspective that we should keep in mind that, I don't know, we've got several more questions, but what do you think is most appropriate at this point? So you see there, each one is talking about prejudice and what various groups have tried to do to overcome prejudice. And can it be a lesson to us today? I think so.
Let me ask you this. What type of prejudices do you think exist today? What's that? Disability. Yes. Yes, thank you. Anyone else? Anyone else? There's so many things that people have prejudices about. Is that a word, prejudices? Am I saying that right? I don't feel like it sounds right. But does anyone else what? Race, yes, that's what we've been talking about, race. Gender, yes. Religion, absolutely. Anyone else? Okay, those were great things, yes? Age, yeah. Yeah. Yes?
Weight, maybe?
What?
Weight, maybe? I don't know.
Weight? Yes. Yeah, that's the big one in 2020. Okay, these are all things that people have a prejudice about, or some people have a prejudice about. So it may be race, but maybe one of these other things. And what we want to look at and understand is that no matter what, no matter if someone is different from us, no matter if they live a lifestyle that we agree with or that we don't agree with, we always have to be compassionate and respectful to all people, right? And I think that is the message here. Whatever the difference is, we are all human beings, and all human beings deserve respect and compassion. And I think that is the #1 message that we want people to understand, is that all people deserve compassion and respect. And we need to not look at differences of people, and we need to look at that similarity that we are all human beings. We all have a brain, and our brain thinks differently, and that's okay, right? We're all individuals, but we all have this similarity of being a human being, and compassion and respect must always prevail. Any last words from you guys? Thank you. Thank you very much for being here today.